You ever notice how we all have that one story we never tell? The secret that rides shotgun everywhere we go? The thing that shaped us, but we're afraid to admit it even to ourselves? Hey, I'm Alex Turner. This channel isn't about judging. It's about listening. Because I think every person you see has a hidden chapter. Maybe a regret, maybe a choice, maybe a goodbye that still hurts. I started this project to give real people a space to speak their truth, honest, raw, and sometimes messy. Tonight, you'll hear 5 confessions. They aren't celebrity scandals or clickbait drama. They're real stories about lost chances, secrets we carry, the kind of forgiveness we struggle to find. If you've ever held on to something in silence, if you've ever wondered if you're alone in your regrets, you're not. Let's listen together.
I've always felt like Philly wasn't just a city. It was its own little universe. The kind of place where the same corner stores stay in business for 20 years. The old-timers know your name. And those damn yellow leaves just keep falling every October. But time moves on here too. Slips through your fingers. And one day you're left wondering, what if I just left when I had the chance? I find myself thinking back to '93 more than I care to admit. I was 24, and the world seemed huge, like that old park on South Street where me and Tom used to run around as kids, collecting bottles for change, talking big about the future. Tom was always the dreamer. Me, I was the careful one. Even as a kid, when everyone else was jumping off garage roofs, I'd stand there calculating whether I'd bust my leg. That year was rough. Dad was sick, Mom was exhausted, working 2 jobs. My sister Jenny had just finished high school, still wide-eyed, like the world owed her something. I was working in a warehouse, not much money, but I knew everybody. The guys on the loading dock, the boss, the old-timer brought donuts on Fridays. We all said hi by name. One night I got home late. It smelled like rain outside, my boots were soaked through. Mom was in the kitchen, humming some old tune while she washed dishes. "Where you been, Mark?" "I got stuck late at work," I lied. Truth was, I'd been out drinking cheap beer with Tom, arguing about what comes next. That same night, Tom called the house phone. "Sullivan, you listening? Remember how we always talked about taking off for the West Coast?" "Yeah, Tom, about 10 years ago." "Well, listen up. My dad's buddy in San Jose, he's an investor. Says he'll stake us for a small shop. If we get out there now, we could start something, together." "What about your old man?" "He'll live," Tom snorted. Then softer. "Mark, this is our shot." I didn't know what to say. We talked for another hour, tossing ideas, an auto shop maybe, a greasy spoon, hell, even one of those little coffee joints like in the movies. Tom goes, "Trains leave every day. But the one you wait your whole life for, that one only comes once." I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there, listening to the wind rattling the windows, Dad snoring down the hall, my sister kicking at the wall in her sleep. Mom poked her head in, handed me a glass of water. "Can't sleep, hon?" "Just thinking." "About what?" "What's next?" She chuckled. "First, there's nothing, then suddenly, it's everything." Next morning, I went down to the train station anyway. I still remember the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the squeak of the turnstiles, the old lady selling newspapers by the door. I stood in line, wallet in hand, listening to the announcement. "Train to Chicago, leaving in 10. I only had about $200 to my name. Payday was 2 weeks out. Mom had just paid the doctor. Suddenly, Dad calls me. "Mark, don't forget the bread on your way home." "All right, Pop." And just like that, I knew. I wasn't going. Not today. I walked out of the station, bought bread, cigarettes, a 6-pack, told Tom, "Can't do it, not now." He said, "Come on, Mark." I said, "I'm not quitting, just not the right time." Years have gone by since that day, but sometimes I still dream about that station, that line, that feeling. Life was right there, and I just couldn't reach out and grab it. Years rolled on. Sometimes I think life just kind of drags you along, whether you want to or not. I got a new job after the warehouse, then lost it when they cut hours. I did some odd gigs, met a woman named Claire at the diner. Married her too soon, if I'm honest. We had our daughter Sarah in a crappy little apartment that leaked every time it rained. We laughed, though. We had nothing, but it felt like a kind of freedom. Then Claire left, said she wanted something bigger, packed her stuff and moved to Pittsburgh. I remember sitting on the floor that night, watching Sarah sleep in her crib and thinking, maybe this is as good as it gets. There were nights I'd stare at the ceiling, listening to the trains downtown. I'd wonder, is it too late? Am I stuck here forever? But you get used to the sound of your own routine. Up at 6, coffee with too much sugar, walk Sarah to the bus, punch in at work, clock out, heat up leftovers, maybe watch a Phillies game if I wasn't too tired. Sometimes Sarah would ask, "Dad, did you ever want to live anywhere else?" I'd smile and say, "Maybe, but then I wouldn't have you, would I?" She'd roll her eyes, but I could see her thinking about it. Every so often, Tom would call from California. He'd tell me about his business, the palm trees, the warm winters, his 2 boys. He sent pictures once, him and his wife on the beach, everyone tanned, grinning like they'd never had a bad day. He always said, "You should come out here, Mark, see what you missed." I'd laugh it off, but sometimes I wanted to ask, am I really missing out, or is it just too late to change? There were hard years, layoffs, money so tight I had to borrow from my sister Jenny, who still calls every Sunday just to make sure I haven't given up completely. I worked a night shift at a plant, took overtime whenever I could. One winter, the heat went out for 3 days. Sarah and I wore our coats to bed and made jokes about being Eskimos. We had our fights. Teenagers can cut deep. One night she yelled, "You never do anything. You never go anywhere." I almost yelled back, because I was afraid, okay? Because I made one safe choice and spent my whole life trying not to mess up again. But I just stood there biting my tongue. After she slammed her door, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at an old Phillies mug, and wondered how you explain regret to your own kid. But then we'd make up, every time. Saturday mornings, I'd make pancakes, play old records. Sarah would sit at the counter, scrolling her phone, but sometimes I'd catch her humming along. There were good days, too. We'd take the train into Center City just to watch the crowds or walk along the river, eating pretzels, talking about nothing. I still thought about that ticket sometimes, about Tom, about California, about the man I could have been. When I got laid off the second time, it hit me hard. I almost called Tom and said, "Okay, I'm coming out." But then Dad got sick. Jenny needed help with her kids. Sarah had a school play. Life always found a way to keep me here, in this city. Last year, Sarah asked me, "Dad, if you could do it over, would you have left?" I just looked at her for a while. "I don't know," I said. "I think if I left, maybe I wouldn't have had you. Maybe I wouldn't know how much I could love someone. But sometimes, yeah, I wonder." These days, Sarah's got her own plans. Talks about college in New York or Seattle, maybe even Europe. I tell her, if you get the chance, take it. Don't wait. Don't let the fear keep you standing in line at the station. Sometimes when the house is quiet and I hear a train in the distance, I imagine a younger version of me standing at that ticket window, wallet in hand, full of hope and terror. I wish I could tell him, "Don't be so scared." But I also wish he knew what I know now. Staying isn't always a failure. Sometimes it's just what you do for the people you love. Tom still calls. We joke about being old men, about who's got more gray mare. He always says, "Mark, you ever coming out here?" Maybe one day, but I know I probably won't. I keep an old letter from Tom in my desk drawer. "It's better to regret something you tried than to wonder your whole life what could have been," he wrote. I read it now and then. I don't feel bitter anymore. I just feel grateful for the good days, for Sarah, For this life, for Philly. I'm not the man I dreamed I'd be at 24, but I'm still standing. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what growing up really means. Learning to live with the what-ifs and still finding something good in what you got.
You know, sometimes I think my whole life can be measured in kitchen tables. The scratched Formica one where Mom and I sat over mac and cheese in the 80s, the wobbly thrift store thing I ate ramen at in college, the IKEA table I assembled wrong in my first apartment, and now this battered slab I stand at every Sunday kneading dough, the ghost of my mother somewhere behind my shoulder always. My mom, Nancy, was a force. People talk about strong women like it's a compliment. She was strong the way weather is strong, the way a river carves out canyons. She worked double shifts at the Safeway, dyed her own hair in the sink, and didn't care what anyone thought. My dad? He was a whisper in a hallway, a Christmas card once a year from wherever he was living that season. He left when I was 8. Mom slammed the door so hard the picture of Grandma fell off the wall. I asked if he was coming back. She said, "Honey, I think we're the whole team now." I don't remember feeling sorry for myself. We were poor, sure, but she made poverty an adventure. Midnight donut runs with quarters found in the couch, camping in the living room when the heat got shut off, dancing to old Motown records with socks on her hands for gloves. I was her side chick. In elementary school, she came to every play, always the loudest one in the gym. When I got bullied for wearing hand-me-downs, she taught me how to talk back. She never let me feel less than anyone. But by middle school, something changed. Maybe it was hormones, maybe I just got tired of being poor and angry. I started pushing back, lying about where I was going, sneaking out, getting caught, yelling. She tried to lay down rules. I threw them back at her, hard. I remember the worst fight we ever had. I was 16, she found weed in my backpack. She screamed, I screamed, she threatened to call the cops just to scare me straight. I told her I hated her, that I wished I lived with Dad, that I'd run away the second I turned 18. She slammed the door so hard a glass shattered in the kitchen. That night, I packed a bag and slept in my friend's basement. She called at 2 a.m, voice hoarse. "Just come home, Lisa. I don't care about the weed." I did. Years passed like that. Love, rage, forgiveness, over and over. She was always there, making pancakes the morning after a fight, fixing my prom dress, hiding a $10 bill in my lunch on bad days. I hated her and needed her, sometimes in the same breath. After high school, I moved out, rented a basement apartment with pipes that clanged all night, started college, quit, started again, quit again, worked as a waitress, a barista, a thrift store clerk. Mom always had something to say. "Lisa, when are you going to find something real? Don't end up like me, working nights, missing your life." She called every Sunday, even when I didn't pick up. Sometimes she left messages. "Hey kid, call your mother. I love you." Sometimes just, "Don't forget to buy toilet paper." I dated all the wrong men. The kind who needed saving, the kind who disappeared for weeks, the kind who left their laundry and took my hope. After each breakup, I'd end up on Mom's couch, eating her burnt cookies, her telling me, "You deserve more, Liz. Don't settle for less because you're lonely." We had years of peace and years of Cold War. By my late 20s, I'd found my own apartment, a job I kinda liked, friends who stuck. Mom got sick. At first it was a cough, then fatigue, then hospital visits, pill bottles, notes on the fridge. "Lisa, water the plants. Lisa, call Dr. Kim. Lisa, don't worry, I'm fine." She hated talking about being sick. She'd say, "I'll live forever just to spite you." Our last real fight was about money. I'd borrowed rent from her, then spent my paycheck on a concert instead of paying her back. She called me selfish, said I took advantage. I called her controlling, said I never trusted me to make my own mistakes. We hung up angry. I wrote her a letter that night, full of everything I wanted to say but never did in person. "I'm sorry I'm such a mess. I wish I was easier to love. I don't want to be like you, but I'm afraid I am. I planned to give it to her, but then she had the stroke. One phone call, and I was back in the hospital, sitting by her bed, holding her hand. She never woke up. After the funeral, cleaning her apartment was like going through my own childhood with a flashlight. Old report cards, birthday cards, a shoebox full of recipes in her handwriting. Add extra butter if you're sad. Love letters to my dad she never sent. A picture of us at Disneyland, both of us sunburned and grinning. The mixtape she made for my 13th birthday. I found my letter in her kitchen drawer. Unopened. Still folded. I read it every year on her birthday. Sometimes I talk to her out loud. When I burn bread, when my plants die, when I get dumped, when I get a raise. Sometimes I feel her standing behind me, arms crossed, saying, "See, you turned out fine." I wish I'd told her more. I wish I'd said, "Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you. I was scared." But here's what I know. Regret softens eventually. It becomes part of you, not the whole story. Every Sunday, I bake her bread, play her favorite Motown record, and let myself remember not just the fights, but the laughter, not just the pain, but the love that held us together even when it hurt. I keep her picture on my fridge. I keep her voice in my head. And when I miss her most, I read the letter one more time and whisper, "I'm okay, Mom. I really am."
I never thought I'd be the kind of dad who lost touch. But here I am, standing in the parking lot of a grocery store on the north side of Houston, hands shaking, rehearsing what I'll say to a kid who, lately, only calls me Carlos, not Dad. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have told you I was a good father. Not perfect. No, who is? But I showed up. I went to soccer games, packed lunch boxes, built science projects out of toothpicks and old shoe boxes. After the divorce, things got messy. My ex, Vanessa, she moved to the other side of town with our son, Daniel. 8 years old, smart, sensitive, always asking questions I didn't know how to answer. At first, I tried. I fought for weekends, for extra time, for those little rituals we'd made. Friday night pizza, building Lego cities in the living room, dad days at the Astros games. But life has a way of wearing you down. Work picked up, money was tight, Vanessa started dating someone new, and suddenly Daniel's schedule was full of birthday parties, church camps, piano lessons. Somewhere in all that noise, I started making excuses. "Next weekend, buddy. Dad's got a late meeting. We'll do it soon, I promise." Before I knew it, weeks turned to months. Calls went unanswered. I sent texts. "How was school? Want to see a movie?" Got nothing back but the occasional thumbs-up emoji. I started telling myself he'd come around, that kids need space, that teenagers are busy, that boys and their fathers drift, and then come back together when they're older. But that's a lie, and I knew it. One night I was at my buddy Marco's place watching the Rockets lose on TV. He asked, "When's the last time you saw Daniel?" I lied. "Oh, last month, I think." Truth was, it had been almost half a year. That night I sat in my car outside Marco's house, staring at the dashboard, thinking about my own father. He left when I was 12. Promised he'd call, he'd visit, he'd be at my baseball game. He never did. I swore I'd never be like him. But here I was, making the same excuses. The first time I tried to call Daniel after all those months, I stared at my phone for 10 minutes, thumb hovering over his name. I told myself, he's busy, he's probably with friends, don't bother him. But really, I was just scared he'd hang up or, worse, not answer at all. He picked up on the third ring. His voice sounded older, deeper, almost unfamiliar. "Yeah? Hey, Daniel. It's, me." Pause. "Hey." Awkward silence. I cleared my throat. "Just checking in. Wanted to see how you doing?" "Fine. Busy with school? Yeah, I get it. High school's a lot. Hey, maybe we could get lunch this weekend or just hang out. He hesitated, then mumbled, I have plans. I told myself it was normal, right? Kids that age are supposed to pull away. But it felt like someone twisting a knife in my chest. That night I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Daniel at 6, front teeth missing, holding a soccer trophy. Daniel at 10, building a model rocket. Daniel at 12, blowing out candles on a lopsided birthday cake I tried to bake. There was a time when he'd beg me to read just one more chapter, when he'd fall asleep on my chest during movie night, when Dad meant everything. I thought about my own dad. The few times he called, it always ended with, we'll get together soon, I promise. I grew up hating that phrase. I promised myself I'd be different. But somewhere along the way, I got tired. Work, bills, loneliness, it all piled up, and I let it. Instead of fighting for Daniel, I let the world convince me I didn't matter. Maybe that's the real reason I stayed away. I was ashamed. A couple months later, Vanessa called. Her voice was tight, like she'd been crying. Daniel's failing math. He doesn't talk to me anymore. Can you try? I almost said he won't want to see me. But instead I agreed. The next Saturday I waited outside his apartment, hands sweating, heart racing. He came down in a hoodie, backpack slung low, earbuds in. He barely looked at me. Hey man, I said, trying to sound casual. Hey, want to get some tacos? Your favorite place is still open. We sat in silence most of the meal. I asked about school, about friends, about soccer. He shrugged, gave one-word answers. I felt like a stranger at my own table. Halfway through, I blurted out, I'm sorry, Daniel. I messed up. I should have been there. I have no excuse. He looked at me, eyes cold. Why now? I swallowed. Because I can't go back, but I want to do better. If you'll let me. He stared at his plate, then nodded. Whatever. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The weeks after that were clumsy. I'd text Daniel about movies or basketball games, sometimes get no reply, sometimes just a thumbs up. I didn't give up. I showed up at his soccer matches even when he barely glanced at the stands. I tried to help with homework, but he mostly worked in silence, headphones on. One Sunday I offered to help him with math. He rolled his eyes but let me sit beside him at the table. For half an hour I tried to explain equations the way I remembered my own dad doing it before he disappeared. Daniel barely looked up, but at one point he sighed and said, This isn't how Mr. Owens teaches. I almost snapped back but caught myself. I just said, Maybe we can figure it out together. He shrugged, but he didn't leave the table. Little by little there were cracks in the wall. A joke about his teacher, a story about a friend, a complaint about the cafeteria food. We went for burgers after one match. He still barely talked, but at least he didn't rush to leave. One night I dropped him off and he paused before getting out. Thanks for, trying. I wanted to reach out, to hug him, but I was scared he'd pull away. So I just said, I'll always try, Daniel, no matter what. Back home, I thought about what it meant to really be a father. It wasn't birthday cakes or big gestures. It was showing up again and again, even when you'd already failed. I started telling him more about my own life, about my dad, about how I was scared too. One day, as we were driving, I admitted, I used to think my father's biggest mistake was leaving, but maybe it was giving up on trying. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'm not mad. I didn't know what to say to you anymore. That hit me harder than any insult ever could. There were setbacks, weeks when he didn't want to see me, when I wondered if it was all pointless, but I kept coming. I kept texting, sometimes just thinking of you, proud of you. On his 16th birthday, I gave him an old baseball glove that belonged to my grandfather. He looked at it for a while, turning it over in his hands. Then, almost too quietly, Thanks, Dad. He hadn't called me that in years. That night, after I dropped Daniel off, I sat in my car for a long time, listening to the radio hum. I thought about all the years I let slip away, too proud, too tired, too ashamed to fight for the one thing that mattered. You spend your 20s thinking you'll never be your parents, your 30s realizing you're repeating their mistakes, your 40s hoping you still have time to fix at least some of them. Sometimes I wonder how different things might have been if I just tried harder, called more, pushed through my own hurt. But the past doesn't hand out do-overs. What I have now is this: a kid who sometimes calls me Dad again, who lets me stand on the sideline, who sit with me in silence, and just maybe let me help him through the mess. I know I'll never be perfect. I'll never get back those lost years, but I can show up again and again, no matter how many times it takes. Sometimes when I see Daniel smile or hear him laugh at something I say, I think about my own father, how much I wanted him to try even when I pushed him away. So this is what I would say to myself all those years ago, and to anyone standing in a parking lot afraid to call. Don't let pride or fear or guilt steal the time you still have. Show up, even if you don't know what to say. Show up, even if it hurts. That's what being a father means. And for the first time in a long time, I believe I might actually be one.
I always thought heartbreak would feel louder. But when David finally told me the truth, after 20 years and 2 kids and a mortgage and 1,000 ordinary Thursdays, it was almost silent. He sat across from me at our kitchen table, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the chipped coffee mug between us. "I have to tell you something," he said, voice barely above a whisper. And I knew. I'd known for months, maybe years, in the way you know the seasons are changing before you see the leaves fall. Late nights at the office, locked phones, that distant, embarrassed kindness in bed. But knowing is different from hearing it out loud. He cried more than I did. I sat perfectly still, focusing on the clock behind his shoulder. Tick, tick, tick. He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "It was a mistake." He said, "It meant nothing." And still, I sat there. It felt like grief, but not the kind you read about in novels. It was smaller, meaner, sharp around the edges. It made the air in the room feel thinner. Afterward, he slept in the guest room. I watched him fold his pajamas, careful and neat, as if he could organize his way out of what he'd done. For the next few weeks, we moved like strangers. We texted about groceries, about the kids' schedules, about whether the plumber was coming on Thursday. But we never touched, never looked each other in the eye. Friends asked what was wrong, and I lied. I got good at lying. At night, I'd lie in bed and replay every moment, searching for the day things changed. Was it when I turned 40 and stopped coloring my hair? Was it when I started working late myself, needing space but not knowing how to ask? Or was it always there, waiting for one of us to crack? I thought about leaving, but the thought made me more tired than angry. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. For a while, I just floated. Went to work, came home, made dinner, did laundry, watered the plants. Everything exactly the same, but nothing the same at all. David stayed in the house, in the guest room. We told the kids, both in college by then, that their dad needed some space to figure things out. My daughter, Megan, called every night, voice tense, waiting for the real story. My son, Ben, sent short texts. "You okay, Mom?" I always said yes. I started seeing a therapist. Her office smelled like cinnamon and lemon, and the walls were covered in framed quotes about forgiveness and strength. She asked, "What do you need right now?" I said, "I don't know. I just don't want to feel so angry all the time." Mostly, I talked about little things. The way David still rinsed his cereal bowl every morning, like nothing had changed. How I caught myself looking at my reflection in shop windows, searching for what he'd stopped seeing. How friends stopped inviting us to couples dinners, quietly taking sides, as if heartbreak was contagious. Some nights, I'd drive aimlessly through the city, down along the river, past the frozen lakes, watching lights flicker in houses where, I imagined, everyone else was still whole. I bought myself flowers. I baked bread from scratch, just to fill the kitchen with warmth. One night, Megan came home for a weekend. She found me at the table, surrounded by cookbooks and lists for the grocery store. She said, "Are you going to leave him?" I stared at my hands. "I don't know." She said, "You don't have to do anything for us. We're grown." I nodded. But the truth is, I didn't know how to be alone. I hadn't been truly alone since I was 21. After Megan went to bed, I sat on the back steps, listening to the wind rattle the trees, feeling more like a ghost in my own life than a person. The night I decided to end it for good, there was no big fight. Just quiet. David stood in the hallway, holding a stack of his shirts. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. He said, "I'll move out. I'll find a place." I just nodded. We didn't cry, we didn't shout. We just sorted through 20 years of our life together. Photo albums, the old sofa, the battered coffee table with marker stains when the kids were little. He took his bike, some books, half the dishes. I kept the garden tools, the dog, and the casserole dish we'd gotten as a wedding present. The first night alone in the house, I barely slept. Every sound felt too loud. The ticking clock, the furnace switching on, the dog's nails on the wood floor. I kept getting up, walking from room to room, searching for something I couldn't name. After the papers were signed, people started treating me like a patient recovering from surgery. Friends brought over casseroles, left voicemails, invited me to yoga. I smiled, thanked them, and learned to live in the silence. I found new rituals: long walks by the Mississippi, hot tea at night, movie marathons with the dog curled up beside me. On Sundays, I went to the farmer's market, let myself buy the expensive peaches just because they smelled like summer. Therapy was harder now, no longer about anger, but about fear. Who was I if I wasn't David's wife? Who was I if my kids didn't need me every day? One afternoon, my therapist asked, "When was the last time you did something just for joy?" I couldn't remember. So I signed up for a pottery class at the community center. My hands shook on the first day, but by the end, I'd made a lopsided bowl I was weirdly proud of. Some nights were still lonely. I'd scroll through my phone, see couples on vacation, old friends with grandkids, and wonder if I'd missed my chance at happiness. Other nights, I'd stand on the porch in the dark, breathing in the city air and feel okay. Not great, but okay. Slowly, I started to feel real again. A year after the divorce, Megan and Ben took me out for my birthday. We sat in a loud restaurant, passing plates of pasta, laughing at old family stories. I caught Megan watching me carefully, as if waiting for me to break. But I didn't break. I told them about my pottery class, about my walks by the river, about the neighbor's dog who always stole my newspaper. They smiled, maybe a little surprised. It felt good to see them relax. A few months later, I went on my first real date in decades. His name was Harold. He worked at the library, loved jazz, wore plaid shirts, and smelled like cinnamon gum. I was terrified. I spent an hour picking out clothes, another hour talking myself out of canceling. But Harold was gentle. He listened more than he talked. He didn't ask about my ex-husband, and I didn't offer. We had coffee, then took a walk around the lake. He told me about losing his own marriage, about learning to live alone. There was no spark, not really. But I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. I dated a few more men, some kind, some awkward, a few who only wanted to talk about themselves. I learned to say no without feeling guilty. I learned that I could be alone and still feel whole. My world got bigger. I made new friends, mostly other women starting over, all of us a little bruised but willing to try again. We shared recipes, swapped stories, took day trips to little towns just for fun. Sometimes late at night, I'd still miss the life I thought I'd have. Sometimes I'd dream about David, about our early days, about the house full of laughter, about kids' feet running down the hall. But in the morning, I'd wake up, make coffee, and feel okay. One day, I called Megan just to say I loved her. She said, "You sound happy, Mom." I thought about it for a while. I think I am, or getting there, anyway. I kept the old casserole dish. I still bake bread, sometimes for one, sometimes for friends. I go to the market, buy the peaches, and let myself feel grateful. This wasn't the life I planned, but it's mine now. And for the first time in years, that's enough.
My earliest memories are always about hiding. Hiding bad grades from Mom, hiding when I snuck candy into my room, hiding tears after Anna, my little sister, would beat me at checkers and do that little victory dance. We were an ordinary Asian American family, neat row house in Daly City, Dad gone before I really knew him. It was just the three of us, Mom, Anna, and me. Mom worked at the library, ran the place like a ship. She had rules for everything: shoes off at the door, homework before TV, always say thank you, even if you're angry. I wasn't rebellious, not really. I just got good at disappearing. When Anna got all the attention for her piano recitals, I became the quiet one. Good grades, silent worries, always the peacemaker. In high school, I was the good Chinese girl. I played by the rules, mostly. Did debate, hung with the band kids, went to youth group, volunteered at the food bank, had friends, but not the kind you confess secrets to. That came later. College was freedom and loneliness all at once. UC Davis felt huge, anonymous, full of people who didn't care who I'd been at home. I liked that. I could stay out late, change my hair, date boys Mom would never approve of. That's where I met Tyler. He was the opposite of everything I grew up with. Blonde, Californian, loud, messy, a physics major who played guitar just to be annoying. I fell for him because he never seemed to need approval from anyone. We were together for almost a year. It was never serious, but it felt real, in the way that only first love can. We'd drink bad beer at house parties, walk through the Arboretum at midnight, talk about leaving California and starting over somewhere cold. Spring semester, I missed a period. I didn't panic at first. I told myself it was stress, exams, life, everything new. By May, it was obvious. I took a test in the dorm bathroom, hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. When that little pink line appeared, I sat on the tile for 20 minutes, just staring at the wall. I didn't tell Tyler. He was talking about internships in Seattle, already half gone. I figured, why make him feel guilty? Why make it messier? I called the campus health center, made the appointment, told Mom I had extra study sessions, lied to my roommate. Nobody knew. That's how I wanted it. But it was like walking around with a thunderstorm inside my skin. The next months were a series of secrets. Baggy clothes, skipped parties, avoiding mirrors. I worked at a little tea shop off campus, lied about having the flu when morning sickness got bad. Sometimes I thought about abortion, Googled clinics, read forums, rehearsed the conversation in my head. But every time I tried to imagine it, I'd picture my mom's face, or Anna's, or the old women at church, and I couldn't do it. I told myself I'd keep it together, that I'd figure something out. Second trimester, I started to show. Nobody said anything. Maybe they just didn't want to be rude. Maybe they figured I was gaining the freshman 15. I drifted away from Tyler for good, told people we'd grown apart. I skipped out on the last few weeks of classes saying I'd caught mono. Every day felt like waiting for a siren. When the time came, I went to the hospital alone. I told the nurse my mom was out of town, filled out paperwork with a fake address, let the machines beep and the lights blur overhead. Labor was fast. I barely remember it. Just pain and a kind woman holding my hand and the sound of crying that wasn't mine. It was a girl. I named her June, silently just in my head. They let me hold her for half an hour. She looked like Anna did as a baby. Black hair, tiny hands, eyes squeezed shut against the world. They took her for adoption before sunrise. I signed the forms, didn't let myself cry. The nurse gave me a pamphlet. She said, "You did something brave." I didn't feel brave. I felt empty, like I'd stepped out of my own life and was watching it happen to someone else. After, I spent 3 days in my dorm pretending to be sick. Then I went back to class, finished my finals, got my grades. Nobody noticed anything had changed. All that spring after the birth, I moved through life feeling half empty. I came home for the summer, to Mom and Anna. Mom said right away, "You look tired, Emily. Don't forget your vitamins." I'd nod, hide behind my books, help around the house, spin stories about exams and new projects. Anna was always swirling around. Music, boys, plans for her next year at school, and I caught myself seeing her as some distant grown-up. That whole summer was one long mask. At Sunday dinner, Mom would ask about boys, and Anna would tease, "Are you ever going to bring someone home?" I'd shrug it off, laugh in a voice that didn't sound like mine. I realized then there was no room in this family for my secret, but I loved them desperately and never wanted them to feel the kind of pain I was already carrying. When I moved to San Francisco, I picked the most invisible job I could. Tech support, then fintech, lost in a sea of cubicles and strangers. I worked late, drank vending machine coffee, joined meetup groups, always stayed a little on the edge. Once I tried dating a guy from accounting, sweet, boring, obsessed with taxes and running marathons. I bailed after the third date. I just compared everyone to some impossible version of family, or I'd think, what if he ever found out? Could I ever tell someone? By 25, I started wondering if I even wanted a real relationship. My girlfriends were racing to get married. All I felt was this ache for something real. Sometimes, seeing little kids in the park, I'd be overwhelmed by the urge to just sit on a bench and cry, but I never did. A few years later, I tried therapy. At first, I talked about work and stress, complained about Bay Area rents, the weather, and my messy apartment. But one day, my therapist just asked, "What are you hiding?" I said nothing. Then she said, "Sometimes to finally breathe, you have to open a window, even if it's scary."
I decided to write a letter to the adoption agency. I read it 100 times before mailing it. I don't want to intrude. I just need to know. Is she happy? Is she loved? I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope I did the right thing. A month later, I got a short, official reply. Your daughter is healthy, growing up in a loving family. Thank you for your choice. I carried that letter in my bag for a week. Then, late at night on my balcony, I burned it and cried for the first time in years. Time kept moving. Anna got married, moved to Oakland, then had a baby, her daughter. When I saw her holding her own child, I felt something inside me just collapse. Mom grew older, softened, stopped asking about when I'd settle down. On my 32nd birthday, she said, "I'm proud of you, Emily. You're so strong, but you always seem a little alone." I just smiled, looking away. At 33, I finally felt almost ready to tell someone, anyone. I tried a support group for women like me. Sitting in a circle of strangers, when it was my turn, I just said, "I've never told anyone, but I'm a mother, even though nobody knows it." A woman next to me squeezed my hand. Someone cried, someone just nodded. I went home, emptied out, but lighter. When Anna got her second baby, she asked me to help for the first week. Her house was chaos, loud and honest, in a way my life never quite was. One night, Anna told me, "You'd be a great mom, Em. Sometimes I feel like you're keeping something from me." I was quiet a long time, then said, "I'm just different, Anna, but I'm always here if you ever need me." That night, lying on her couch, I really thought, what if I finally told the truth? What if I didn't have to carry this alone anymore? A few months after Anna's second baby was born, I found myself back at Mom's house for one of those lazy Saturday afternoons. Mom was in the kitchen, folding laundry and drinking tea, the radio playing old Mandarin pop songs in the background. She watched me for a while, then asked, "Emily, are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I almost gave my usual answer. "I'm fine, just busy," but for some reason, this time I couldn't. I stared at the mug in my hands, and the words started to come out before I could stop them. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Something I've been carrying for a long time." She turned off the radio, sat down across from me, and waited. Her silence was kind. She was always patient when it really mattered. I told her everything. About Tyler, about the pregnancy, about the months hiding in Davis, about the baby girl I named June in my head, about how I signed the papers, rode the train home, and went back to class like nothing had happened. About the letter I wrote, the response from the agency, the years I'd spent aching and pretending. I was shaking by the end, but I finally looked up at her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She reached across the table and took my hand. "Emily, I'm so sorry you went through that alone." Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I wish you'd told me. I wish I could have helped." Tears came then. Hers, mine, all the years of secrets finally breaking through. Anna came downstairs to find us, eyes red, still holding hands. I saw the worry on her face, and before I could change my mind, I told her too. I thought she'd be angry, feel betrayed. Instead, she hugged me hard, whispering, "You're still my sister. You'll always will be. You're braver than you think." That night, we sat on the porch, the three of us, listening to the city noise and the distant sound of Anna's girl sleeping upstairs. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I could finally breathe. In the weeks that followed, something shifted inside me. It was subtle at first, a kind of quiet, gentle relief. At work, I smiled more. I noticed myself humming in the elevator, letting myself pause at the window to watch fog roll over the city instead of hiding behind spreadsheets and meetings. Anna called me nearly every day just to check in. Sometimes she'd talk about her kids. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence. It felt like we were building something new, closer, more honest. I started therapy again, but this time, it wasn't about guilt or hiding. It was about learning how to be present. My therapist asked, "What do you want for yourself now?" For the first time in my life, I answered, "I want to feel whole. I want to forgive myself, not just for June, but for all the ways I stopped living." I signed up for a cooking class. I let myself laugh at burnt scones and ugly dumplings. I joined a book club, met people who didn't know anything about my past. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an imposter. One day, I got a letter from the adoption agency. It was short. "June is now a teenager. She's healthy, bright, and loves art. If you ever wish to write a letter for her file, you're welcome to." I spent a week thinking about what to say. Finally, I wrote, "Dear June, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I hope you know you have always been loved. I made the choice I did because I believed it was the best way to give you a chance at a good life. There isn't a day I don't think about you or wish things could have been different. I hope you are safe, happy, and surrounded by love. With all my heart, Emily." I didn't expect anything back, but sending the letter felt like setting something free. A year later, I sat on Anna's porch with her daughters running circles around us. Mom was inside, making tea and fussing about the weather. I watched the girls giggling, their hair tangled and faces flushed with sun. Anna looked at me and said, I always thought you were the strong one. Turns out, you're the bravest too." I smiled, truly smiled. That night, I walked home through the city, letting the cool bay breeze hit my face. I felt every step, grounded, real, present. I still think about June. I probably always will, but for the first time, I don't feel like a thief in my own life. I feel like a woman who has carried her secret, survived it, and finally, let herself live. The next spring, Anna invited me on a weekend trip with her family up Point Reyes. It was gray and blustery, the ocean foaming against the rocks, her girls squealing as they chased waves and built crooked driftwood forts. One afternoon, while Anna napped with the kids and Mom explored tide pools, I walked alone along the cliffs. For the first time in years, I let myself just be. I let the salt wind sting my face, let the tears come and go without shame. I found a quiet spot and sat with my knees pulled to my chest, watching the endless horizon. I thought of June, wondered what she looked like now, if she had my nose, if she ever thought of me. I pulled out my phone and opened the note where I'd saved her letter, reading it the 100th time. Then I whispered, "I'm sorry. I hope you're happy." On the way home, Anna reached for my hand as I drove. She squeezed it, didn't say a word, but her eyes in the mirror told me she understood more than I'd ever given her credit for. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the ocean, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not quite peace, but the soft, tentative beginning of hope. A few months later, back in San Francisco, I started noticing little things. I slept better. I found myself reaching out, grabbing coffee with old friends, volunteering on weekends, letting laughter come easier. Mom called one evening just to say she missed me, her voice soft and gentle as a lullaby. Anna sent a photo of the girls covered in pink paint, grinning at the camera, and I laughed so hard I almost cried. Sometimes I'd still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about June. There were moments when the loss pressed on me sharp as ever, but it no longer defined every part of my life. Instead, I learned to hold gratitude and grief at the same time, to let them live together in the same heart. On the anniversary of June's birth, I bought a bouquet of wildflowers and left them by the ocean. I didn't say much, just stood in the cool morning fog and let myself remember. That day, I realized I didn't have to be whole to be happy. I didn't have to be forgiven to move forward. I am a daughter, a sister, a friend, and quietly, forever, a mother. If someone out there is listening, if you're carrying a secret you think will break you, I hope you know you're not alone. You can survive it. You can live.
If you're still here, thank you for listening. I believe stories like these don't just belong on a screen. They live in every family, every friendship, every lonely midnight. Maybe you saw yourself in one of these voices. Maybe it gave you a little courage to share your own story, even if it's just with yourself. If you felt something, if you want to hear more, subscribe, leave a comment, or just sit with these stories for a while. We're building a place for real people, real truth, and maybe, just maybe, a little hope. I'm Alex Turner. Thank you for being here.